Since It 2017 is steadily approaching, I figured I'd share some of my favorite things about the novel, as well as differences that not many people touch on when talking about Stephen King's 1986 novel, It. At 1,138 pages, It is one of the longest horror novels in existence. The thing about it is that it's a contradiction of everything its author stands for. King has stated in the past that if the book takes more than 3 months to write, he tosses it in the trash. It took 4 years. During that time, he created a stand-in for Bangor, Maine in Derry, mapping out Derry's entire history and layout in the process. He does a great job bringing the fictionalized city to life, exploring both its past and present. So while we're here, I'm going to highlight major oversights between the novel and the television miniseries, deep diving into Pennywise the Dancing Clown, otherwise known as Mr. Robert Gray. One of the things I don't see anyone talking about is the structure of Stephen King's book. In the 1990 miniseries, the children and adult stories are essentially separate after we are introduced to each of the adults. You get introductions to them, then flashbacks that tell the entirety of the 1958 timeline before the second part focuses solely on the admittedly less interesting adults. In the novel, the storylines are told in alternating sections. This adds another level of suspense to the story because both you and the characters have no idea how they defeated Pennywise the first time. They're learning as you're reading from their memories. The only character that knows the whole story is Mike Hanlon, who stayed in town as the local librarian, and who is afraid that if he reveals everything to them, it will drive them insane. With each flashback, we are given deconstructed sentences that form their thoughts as they transition to the past. It not only shows the way the characters think, but that the past is overwhelming them and that they are not in control as the tide washes over them. Once the adults begin to remember, their chapters are literally interrupted by their childhood, usually in the form of some half-formed idea that, line by line, tears them from the present and tosses them completely into the summer of 1958. The other thing that makes the novel a great read are the parts of the story separated by moving further through history with each of Pennywise's cycles. Although it has been established as being millions of years old, we jump forward in 23 to 30-year breaks from the start of Derry's Roanoke beginnings in the 1700s to the 1930s. The cycle of Pennywise the Dancing Clown is tied intrinsically to Derry's past. Each cycle starts with a small but rather gruesome episode of violence, with the deaths of no more than a handful of people. However, at the end of each of the 2 to 3 year cycle, a rather large sacrifice is needed. These are seen with the Kitchener Ironworks explosion at Easter and the burning of the Black Spot by the Maine League of White Decency. There's also a body warping component to these events. Any contact with Pennywise seems to distort those affected. With the Losers Club, all but Mike Hanlon's minds are wiped. Scars they received during their encounters with It disappear, only returning after they were summoned back to Derry and their memories were jogged. Those older citizens who remember some of the more recent cycles have a similar issue, where it isn't until Mike Hanlon interviews them that they remember seeing the clown in the middle of these catastrophes. Speaking of Pennywise's victims, the popular consensus is that it's only kids. While obviously Pennywise attacks the Losers Club as adults, it always felt that was more of a retaliatory attack than something It preferred. However, in the novel, we find that It attacks many different age groups, ranging from the early 30s Adrian Melton, that starts out the story, to the 6-year-old George Denbrough, although It did consume the entire town of Derry at one point. While It does feed on all ages, it prefers children and their fear since that emotion flavors the meat. During the cycle of 1957 to 58, 8 people are killed before Pennywise's reign of terror is cut abruptly short by the losers. Part of what allows Robert Gray to get away with this is It's supernatural abilities. In a 2013 Q&A panel in Hamburg, Germany, he described Pennywise as such: "There ought to be some sort of binding, horrible, nasty, gross creature. It makes you scream just to see it. What scares children more than anything else in the world? Clowns." As such, Pennywise has become a catch-all for the classic monsters that haunted the kids of the 1950s. We get over 24 different forms, ranging from the aforementioned movie matinee monsters, but also the personal demons of whoever Pennywise is targeting. For Beverly, who has to deal with her abusive father, It appears as Alvin Marsh, as well as the witch from Hansel and Gretel in a particularly bonkers sequence. For Eddie, it's a leper wearing a clown suit offering him a blowjob for a dime, 15 cents overtime. Every victim of It pulls out their own demon to be consumed by, even at times appearing as multiple creatures for different people in the same moment. Add to that, Pennywise has many abilities that seem to make him almost omnipotent and omnipresent. He can teleport, read minds, speak through telepathy, regenerate, shapeshift, appear only to his victims, as well as possibly affect the weather. This makes him a formidable foe, all but impossible to kill. Mr. Bob Gray, as Pennywise calls himself, is revealed to be a cosmic entity older than our universe from the Macroverse. There was a cataclysmic event that caused it to crash on Earth millions of years ago. It is possibly the reason that the dinosaurs went extinct, if that makes you feel any better. As this ancient creature, the source of its powers are not really known, though it feeds on the fears of children, an act of consumption that is rivaled only by the turtle, another being from the Macroverse, who is its mortal enemy. One thing that does come out of the chapters that are told from Pennywise's point of view is that the children's imagination can be used against it, and as adults, they only need to partially believe for it to be able to get to them. Once again, we return to Lovecraftian horror. This was established by H.P. Lovecraft in the late 1920s, featuring the idea that there are creatures out there that are older than time that are inherently evil. That if you even saw these entities, then you'd be driven instantly insane. Lovecraft was a huge influence on King's work. You can find these things in two aspects of Stephen King's It. The first is the deadlights. Pennywise, in his most elemental form, is comprised of these orange glowing deadlights that drive people insane if they glimpse them. Most characters, including George Dembrow and Tom Rogan, lose their minds just by glimpsing its true form. At one point, Bill is almost lost to the deadlights, and the only person we know who was able to come back was Audra Phillips, although she was temporarily catatonic as a result. One of the big differences from the book is that in the film, the deadlights are these white spotlights, whereas in the source material, they are orange lights that are linked together. The other aspect is that its final form is represented by a giant spider. A lot of people were disappointed with that reveal, but the truth of the matter is that it's the closest representation their minds could handle. This is similar to Lovecraftian creations in that they are not able to be comprehended. The only way to combat Pennywise and actually have a chance of killing it is the ritual of Chüd. A Himalayan ritual, it's described as a contest of wills where the glamour and the fighter stick each other's tongues out, then bite into them and tell jokes. Whoever laughs first loses. If the glamour wins, then it gets to eat the soul of the loser. Fun times. What actually happens in practice is that the spider reels back on its haunches, dousing Bill in its orange deadlights before pulling his mind into an eternal void. The tongue is more metaphorical, something to be seized on to ground yourself in this infinite abyss. It's here that, as an 11-year-old, Bill meets the turtle, learns more about it as a construct that is both physical and can thus die, and as an imperative, a thing that exists both in the real world and as an immortal concept. I know that's a weird thought process, but King pulls this off with the frantic pace of thought. In the first contest, Bill is able to throw off it by using an older frame to try and conquer his stuttering. He thrusts his fists against the post and still insists he sees the ghost. This strength, this inner ability to find your voice is what brings Big Bill back from the abyss, almost killing it, but not quite. As it retreats, all his webbing comes down, partially paralyzing anyone who touches it, like a shot of Novocaine. Instead of making sure it was dead as children, they tried to escape. As adults, however, it took more than stuttering Bill to pull this off. Bill misses the tongue of it, but Richie steps in to assist. It's this time that they critically damage it. In the final assist, Eddie steps up, using his inhaler twice to make sure Richie and Bill get back from the void. However, in the process, he gets his arm ripped off and dies there in the darkness. While the last ritual is successful in its mission to a point, it's the wrapping up of the children's storyline that causes the most controversy. Following the ritual of Chüd, the 7 members of the Losers Club spend hours underneath the city trying to navigate their way through the new sewers. In the aftermath, they have lost the bond that kept them so close together, it all seemingly spent in the battle against Pennywise. Although it happens at the end of the novel, it's a tangible example about the separation they went through over the past 28 years. In a, well, let's just state it as it is, a move from left field, Beverly starts undressing in the sewers and proceeds to, pick your favorite euphemism here, have sex with the 6 other boys, one by one, in an effort to pull them back together. This section is detailed, breaking down the feeling of each boy, referring to her childish, unmatured sex in an already uncomfortable scene, and even describes how big Ben is and if she can fit all that into her. While it isn't blow for blow explicit, it does also liken the sex to the mysterious it the girls in her school talked about, without really know what it is. In a book about children growing up before their time and having to confront the evils that adults choose to ignore, ignore, this still feels out of place and is still one of the most discussed portions of the book for those that have read it. In the final confrontation with Pennywise in 1985, after the defeat of the spider, something interesting happens. Among them, it drops a bunch of miscarried eggs. Ben stays back to destroy them while Bill goes after the spider and rips out its heart, presumably destroying it for the final time. One of the points that favors Pennywise's death comes from Beverly Marsh's first real encounter with it, the blood in the drain. When she talks to her mother about the incident, she skirts the issue by saying that a spider crawled out in the drain only to crawl back in. Her mother asks if she killed it, citing that if you kill a spider, it will bring rain. Bev replies that she didn't. This perfectly parallels the story. Indeed, a spider, as in its final form, did come out of the drain. The Losers Club does not kill it in 1958, leading to the 1985 story. And in that final confrontation, the losers kill it, causing a downpour that almost completely destroys Derry, obliterates the standpipe, and leaves no doubt the spider has been killed and the losers are triumphant. But here's the thing. In the 1987 Tommyknockers, one of the characters notices Pennywise as he drives past Derry. Tommy had begun to hallucinate. As he drove up Wentworth Street, he thought he saw a clown grinning up at him from an open sewer manhole, a clown with shiny silver dollars for eyes and a clenched white glove filled with balloons. Now obviously, this is while he's cracking up, but it's still interesting to see Pennywise appear the year after his supposed death. Years later, in 2001's Dreamcatcher, there would be another alien taking the moniker of Mr. Grey. Near the end, he comes across a plaque to the Losers Club. Scrawled in red spray paint is the message, "Pennywise lives." Mr. Grey obviously doesn't recognize the names, including Pennywise. He also is confused as to why Jonesy's memories include a standpipe, which is no longer there. Another allusion to the death of Pennywise and Derry's destruction. There are multiple connections to it throughout the oeuvre of King's work. The main antagonist of the Dark Tower is the Crimson King. He is the ultimate evil of that work, orchestrating chaos and decay, but also described as the Great Scuttering Spider King. In Insomnia, it's hinted that he and Pennywise are the same person, or at least related. As the Crimson King says in Insomnia, "I can be whatever I want. You may not know it, but shape-changing is a time-honored custom in Derry." Another creature from the Dark Tower books is Dandolo, a creature similar to Pennywise. The main difference between the two is that while Pennywise uses fear as his weapon, Dandolo uses humor, feeding off his victims' laughter. There are echoes of Beverly's time with Mrs. Kirsch, along with the Losers Club encounters with it at the house on Neibolt Street. While King has stated that Dandolo and Pennywise are not the same person, there is a chance that Dandolo is Pennywise's offspring. The Shining Stick Halloran shows up during the interlude which deals with the fire at the Black Spot. It turns out that Mike Hanlon's dad Will and Halloran were in the Army Corps together. He was also instrumental in cobbling together that doomed club. Even Christine shows up at one point with Belch Huggins behind the wheel to give Henry Bowers a lift after he attempted to kill Mike Hanlon. It's never identified as such, but a red and white 1958 Plymouth Fury sticks out like a sore thumb in any King fiction. Finally, in 11/22/63, the main character, Jake, heads to Derry in 1958 to stop a double murder that takes place on Halloween that year. During that time, he meets up with Bev and Richie just 2 months after Pennywise's defeat. The interesting thing is that even Jake is able to detect the wrongness of Derry, as well as getting Bev and Richie to allude to what happened with the dancing clown. Based off the timing of the murder that Jake intervenes in, you could argue that it's just brutal enough to be the end of a cycle, all the more reasonable considering the spider was so damaged from its encounter with the losers in August. There are dozens of incidental references across all of King's novels. This ranges from characters, locations, events, or even descriptions that replay or reflect each other in entirely different works. Even his son, Joe Hill, has adopted some of his father's characters and locations into his fiction, even referencing a place called Pennywise's Circus in NOS 4A2. And that's it for another episode. I've always been a huge fan of the original 90s miniseries, despite its obvious flaws. Tim Curry is obviously transcendent as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. I've read the massive tome of Stephen King's It 3 times, each time hearing Tim Curry's voice every moment that Pennywise speaks. When Cary Fukunaga from True Detective was attached, I was excited like none other, but the latest trailers have got me pumped for this next adaptation. As always, you can follow me at justindhurd.net. You can also find me on Twitter at justindhurd. Make sure you check out my Patreon at patreon.com/JustinDHeard. For only $1, you can get early looks at the scripts for the next episodes, get your name recognized at the end of each video like this fine superfan Jeff Straight, as well as influence future content. Also, you can listen to us talking about our recent forays to the movies and our discussions of stuff like Record Store Day 2017 on the Dubious Consumers podcast. While you're setting fire to the hive this week, be sure to send out the smoke signals of like, share, and subscribe. Be sure to hit that bell to get notifications when I have new content out. It's a huge way to help this channel grow. Until next time, this has been Dubious Consumption, and I'm outro.